My ex-mother-in-law gave my 3 kids gifts they loved at Christmas when they were small. 2 days later she came to the house, packed everything she got them into bags and took it all back to the stores because she was broke. What's the biggest dong move you've witnessed? A friend of mine worked on a cruise ship as an entertainer for 6 months. She didn't need that much money on the ship but kept an apartment back in Germany with the landlord getting regular standing order. When she came back home she couldn't get her door open. Called the landlord and he told her he had already thrown out all of her stuff because after 1 month of her cruise she didn't pay the rent. Turns out her parents, who had access to her bank account in case of emergency, took all the money, and she made a lot in those months on the ship to pay the bills because their own salary had gone into 2 new cars. So basically she sat there without an apartment, without any friends in town, totally jet lagged and without a single euro in her pockets. Still makes me mad. My aunt racked up about 60 grand in credit card debt and can't declare bankruptcy because my uncle would lose his job over that. The dong move. She called my grandmother ignorant and uneducated for not changing her will, cutting out other family members to cover my aunt's reckless debt. First off, you shouldn't be waiting for someone's death to fix your mistakes. And the reason my grandmother doesn't have an education is because she spent her teen years at Auschwitz. Whoa, that took a turn. My good buddy's wife is famous for her lack of tact and general pissiness. Their little girl is about 2 years older than mine. Her birthday was coming up, and my daughter, 7 at the time, wanted to pick out the birthday gift. She plays with my friend's daughter and has a good idea what she likes. She made a long list and carefully selected what she thought was perfect. Fast forward to the day of the party. Buddy's daughter opens up my daughter's gift. Her eyes light up, and she squeals thank you. Buddy's wife, oh, honey, Granny got you one of those already. Go ahead and put that one in the Goodwill charity donation box. My daughter was crushed. Took all my strength not to get up and slap the ever-living crap out of my buddy's wife. 6 months later, we drew names for Christmas gifts for the kids. Buddy drew my daughter and his wife forgot to buy a gift for her and didn't realize it until we were passing out gifts. I don't speak with them anymore. The biggest dong move I have ever witnessed was at my friend's birthday party. Around 10 years old, his grandmother sent $10 one scratchies in the mail. The dong move being that she checked all the scratchies before sending them in case one had a big payout. I got to see his face drop as he opened the envelope to find 10 pre-scratched, worthless scratchies. Please tell me that she was on an ever-descending path of senility and truly did not understand the reason why people give scratch-off lottery tickets as gifts. This happened to a co-worker of mine. My co-worker had a son die very young, around 14. He got his son cremated and had him in a vase in his house with pictures etc. One day while he was breaking up with his wife, now ex, he came home from work and the ashes were gone. He still has no idea where they are 5 years later. He assumes she threw them out. It was his son from a previous marriage, not hers. Whoa, my first reaction after reading that was that's disgusting. There's truly no other way to describe that. A few years ago, as I was graduating high school, my dad got incredibly sick and ended up in a coma. While he was in the hospital, I still lived at home, waiting to turn 18 to move out. But living with me was his new girlfriend. He had moved in 2 weeks after my mom left. So I am pretty upset because I thought my dad would die, and in the midst of that, his girlfriend is constantly calling me a liar and telling me she will throw my stuff on the lawn because she doesn't want me there. Now during this time I was working full time at car dealership and wasn't dating anyone. But I later found out that once my dad finally recovered, his girlfriend, now wife, told him I was bringing different men home every night and sleeping with them in his house, and that I didn't care enough to respect his house while he was gone. I never did that. I was almost never home because of work. So then because of what she told him, while he was in the hospital recovering, he took my house key from me and told me I wasn't welcome there anymore. I have cut all ties with her and only see her twice a year at holidays, but we hardly speak. I did cut my father out for a year after it happened, but I decided to try and reconcile with him, and then I got a job at the same company as him, so we see each other every day now. We still have a strained relationship because I have a hard time letting go everything he has done to me over the years. I hope to one day get the courage to explain to him that I never did those things, but I know he won't believe me till he sees what he really is like himself. So for now I keep my distance. I moved an hour away so I know that she won't be in my life, and keeping everything separate is good for now. Unfortunately, it will take more than a few talks to heal the damage he has done to me from this incident and several more. My sister borrowed a large sum of money from our retired mother, with a promised payback plan. It never made a single payment. Mother is now down to her last dollar, so we tried to get our sister to pay her at least some of the money she owes. A few months later a check showed up at our mom's made out to her for $0 and a comment on the bottom that said, "Get a job. My mother will not take legal action against her own daughter." Yes, I've cut all ties to my sister. My son is her only niece-nephew and I vowed that she will never meet him. I have an amazing family of in-laws that are wonderful, so my son has fantastic aunts, uncles and cousins without her being in his life. Plus, as she gets older my sister becomes more xenophobic, and my son, being adopted from a foreign country, isn't American, i.e., white enough to please my sister. It's not totally uncommon for family to screw each other over money. As you and your parents get older, make sure you talk about their finances and how prepared they are for retirement, etc., as well as what their wishes are. Don't leave these things to the last minute, or you may end up surprised and confronted with newfound knowledge of dishonest siblings when it's almost too late to deal with it. My grandmother had a few gold watches she was really proud of. She got them from the mayor or something at some point in her life, and they were worth a fair amount of money. My cousin, who was a bit closer to my grandma than me, I live far away from her, told my grandma she really wanted to have one of the golden watches. So my grandma gave it to her and to her sister. Not soon after I found out that my cousin went straight to the jewelers to sell the watch. My grandma passed away a few months later. My sister was pretty upset because she would have liked the watch as a memento. It wouldn't have mattered if my cousin kept it as such, but she didn't. She sold it right away. We would have gladly paid her the few hundred she got for them at the jewelers. My granddad spent half his life collecting stamps. After my grandma passed away he was really depressed and didn't see the point in anything anymore. He told my uncle that he didn't want to collect stamps anymore and gave him the collection. My uncle put it on eBay straight away and sold it for like 5,000 euros a few days after. To put this into perspective, my granddad also called up my mother and told her to take the cat, then called up a week later saying he wanted him back. He was in a really bad place after losing his wife for 55 years. Something anyone with half a brain should fricking understand. It was his life's work, goddammit. My uncles keep pressuring my grandpa now to give them the money he has saved up. My granddad finally gave up and gave everyone in his family money a few months ago. I didn't want to because I know that he's being pressured about it by my uncles and he should be allowed to live his final days without stress. I couldn't find a way to tell him though. If I gave him the money back he'd take it the wrong way and I don't want to upset him any further. It's in my savings account. I don't know what to do with it. TLDR. One side of my family is only after the money and don't give a crap about my dying grandparents' feelings. The best thing you can do is use that money to visit your grandpa regularly. He would like that better than all the money in the world if you are as nice a person as I gather from your account. My father asked my mother for a divorce on my birthday, took everything they had in their home, started dating a 20-year-old. I took out a $6,000 loan to refurnish a house I started renting with my mother, one I could not afford on my own. My mother died 2 months after moving in. In her final email she told my father to give me the life in so I can pay the loan back and hopefully pay most of the rest of the lease. He took off with it, bought a truck and a stereo, left me broke, in debt, in a lease I couldn't afford, and with a little brother to take care of and get the rest of the way through high school. My parents also owed the school $2,000 that the school demanded from me, or else they would not let my brother graduate. Dong. When I was 8 years old, I left a couple of toys on the floor. My mother, who is rather schizo, snapped and proceeded to smash all of the toys in me and my bro's room. We had a couple of big shelves with boxes of soft toys and books and stuff. and my brother was 3 years old, so there was a lot of really cute kid stuff in there. She tore everything to freaking shreds and threw it out into the hallway at our feet, while ranting about how horrible we were and how much we deserved it. A couple of the things were large and wooden. There was a kid's wheelbarrow type thing that my bro absolutely loved, and she smashed it on the floor incredibly hard directly in front of him. My bro was in absolute shock. He looked terrified. He just stood with this tragic silence throughout the whole episode. That was the first time I can remember him looking like that. He defaulted to that demeanor whenever she would lose it after that, and most of my significant childhood memories involve him standing like that and me trying to console him. This is pretty personal to share. I don't think about it very often, but this post triggered the memory. It feels pretty good to type it out. Jesus, the things parents do to their kids. I just want to go home and hug the heck out of mine right now. I saw a little girl order something off a menu at a restaurant in Florida. When she was done ordering, her mom said, "You really messed up again. I trusted you this time. You wanna get that tummy tuck surgery when you're 20? What's the matter with you? Waiter, give us a few more minutes." My daughter was confused. The little girl was not that overweight, had to be around 10 years old, and was now crying hysterically. The mother kept yelling at her to stop embarrassing her and making a scene. I'm a dude, was about 22 at the time, and actually considered the consequences of smacking her in the face. While smacking her in the face would have been illegal, calling her a stupid cuntbag and a few other choice names would have been totally called for. This is exactly the type of behavior that causes eating disorders. I went to a small Southern Baptist church as a kid. A friend of mine whose family didn't have a lot of money stayed over on a Saturday night and went to church with my family the next morning. She was concerned about her clothes because she didn't own a dress, but she had some nice khaki pants and a nice shirt, and we told her that would be absolutely fine. The preacher's wife approached us after Sunday school, before the service, and pulled my friend to the side of the sanctuary. My friend was trying to pull her arm away because the woman was hurting her, so I followed, and heard the preacher's wife say to her, "Listen, you're welcome in God's house, but I don't want to see you back here until you can find something decent to wear." My mother had followed me and heard her, so we packed up and left right then, and did not go back. We'd been going to that church for about 10 years. I can totally hear the lady's tone, and it makes me want to punch her in the face. That is awful. A crazy lady in my buddy's family will routinely host parties and such just so that there is a large number of purses available to pick from. A bar around here told a packed house that anyone who could drink the bar towel shot, a shot glass filled with the squeezed nastiness of the bar towel, and keep it down could drink for free for a week. Some dude actually did it and we all drunkenly cheered for his disgustingly iron stomach, and it was rad. That is, up until the bartender told him that it wasn't actually approved by management and that he would have to do it again when the manager was around. Thankfully, the bartender was fired for this and the poor dude who drank it actually got $100 of drinks on the house for whenever he wanted. Man, as somebody who can't even stand the smell of the bar towel on a busy night, I'm actually glad that the bartender was fired for trying to pull that crap. Many years ago, I allowed my brother-in-law to stay with us temporarily as he lost his job and his apartment and had nowhere else to go. He acts nice in the beginning. We go out of town for a few weeks and he is eager to watch the house for us. We come back. He has changed all the locks. We knock and he refuses to answer. Suddenly cops pull up and he had successfully evicted us from our own property. Had to rent another place for 6 weeks until we could go through legal proceedings and get back in. When we did get back in, he had trashed the house, poured milk and eggs on the carpets, put raw chicken inside the walls, stolen all the plugs and fixtures, ceiling fans, etc. Sold our appliances, and he even killed a bunch of random stray cats in the neighborhood and laid them all around the house. Called the cops again and was told it was a domestic civil issue and to take him to small claims court. TLDR. Allowed down on his luck bill stay with us. He evicts us and trashes our house before we get our home back. My girlfriend and her 2 kids were living with my girlfriend's mother. This nut job is always emotionally abusive to my girlfriend, telling her she is a terrible parent and all she does is go to bars and drinks. She never does. Well, One day about a year ago, the GF's mother decides she doesn't like her daughter and grandkids hanging out with me, so she throws all of their stuff into plastic bags and kicks my GF and her 7 and 8-year-old out. My GF and I had already been talking about them moving in with me when summer hit, but her mom hates me so much that she takes it out on her daughter and grandkids. Fast forward to last week. I propose. The girls and woman I love accept. When she tells her mom, the lunatic sends her a crazy email about how she is the worst parent in the world, and how she doesn't want to ever see my fiancé again, and how she is looking forward to seeing the girls when they are 18, unless CPS takes them first. Upvote for caring whether or not the girls accepted your proposal too. Similar kind of situation with my now ex. She opted to separate a couple of weeks before Christmas. I almost didn't notice because I was working 16+ hour days with Y2K prep. So when the morning of the 25th she showed up with her entire family with pickups and trucks to take out all of her things from the house, which was literally everything. The kicker is after I was visibly cleaned out, she went to the closet to pull out the presents that I bought for the kids and stated, "They can open them at my new place. They have no beds to sleep in here. You want them to have their gifts, right?" I consider all of that time to be a dong move. My older sister has been wanting to have children forever, like years now. Unfortunately, she is unable to have kids. I have another sister who is totally incapable of taking care of children, yet she has 5. She only has custody of one of them, presumably because it's only like 6 months old and there hasn't been enough time to take it away from her yet. Anyway, some of my family was gathered at my house. My mother, my sister who is unable to have children, my brother, and a couple of other people. My mom starts pulling out tons and tons of children clothes to give to my other crappy sister, who isn't even there, for her soon-to-be daughter. She's asking my sister what she thinks and talking about how great it's going to be to have a granddaughter, etc. My sister is obviously upset about this and the rest of the family can clearly see this, but for some reason my mother is totally oblivious to it and she keeps dragging out baby crap and showing it to my sister. A while later my mother's family has a reunion and my good sister brings 2 of my nephews. She worked something out with their foster parents and she is basically trying to get okayed to adopt them. They are able to go camping with the whole family. They just have to be back in town in time to meet their foster parents. Anyway, a bunch of us drive about 10 or 15 miles from where everyone was staying to go see the cabin my grandfather built and hang out in the woods and stuff. But my sister stayed at the cabins. Apparently, my mom didn't think it was a big deal if the kids were late meeting their foster parents and didn't care to tell anyone or get them back to my good sister on time, therefore jeopardizing my good sister's chances of being able to adopt them. My brother and I found out, got a hold of my good sister who had no idea where anyone was, and got the kids to her as quickly as possible. She was hysterically crying and understandably mad. TLDR. My mother paraded baby clothes for my worthless sister's daughter in front of my infertile sister and may have ruined her chances of adopting my nephews so they don't have to live with foster parents because again, my other sister is freaking worthless. These probably aren't the biggest dong moves I've witnessed, but they're what came to mind when I read the ARP's story. Not mine, but a co-worker's. My co-worker and her husband are a pretty healthy bunch, not really into fast food and such. A number of years ago when one of their sons was quite young, the husband's mother came down for a visit and made promises to their son that she would take him to McDonald's since his folks never do. She kept pumping the kid up telling him how much fun they were going to have at McD's. He was super excited. Then one day during the visit, the grandmother comes home and calls to the young child and says, "Guess where I just was? I went to McDonald's and it was fantastic." She proceeded to tell the little guy about the food she had and how great it tasted. He sat there heartbroken listening to her. After he asked his mother why Nanny had went without him, why had she made these great promises and followed through? Little guy was really disappointed. The mom had no real answer for him. I have heard more of these stories, involving returned Christmas gifts and this woman fighting and stealing the clothes from an unfortunate soul who had gotten them from a donation center. My best friend got married. The bride's side of the family said they would pay for the wedding if it was within reason. So they kept everything within reason. Instead of paying for the wedding, the bride's family spent the money on a vacation and didn't tell them. So they had to postpone their wedding because nothing was paid for. So my friend and his wife paid for the wedding themselves. When the big day finally came around, the bride's family gave $150 and an IOU in a card saying, "We owe you a better gift." The family has a boat, a Jag, and took another vacation that year. When I was 17, I wanted a car, so I arranged with my dad to buy his '82 Omega. I worked hard at my menial cashier job that paid $4.25 an hour and have him $100 a month for 5 months until I had paid it off. I was so proud. All Pop had to do was give me the title and let me register it. But he said number. I couldn't have it, and a month later he sold it to someone else for $500 also. I had no car and was out $500. He never did give me my money back. TLDR. My dad hustled me out of $500, sold my car twice and left me in the lurch. After I graduated high school, my mom asked my dad, they're divorced, to help pay for a laptop for me for college. He agreed, on the stipulation that I do some pretty intense manual labor for him all summer at $10 an hour to be taken off the price of the computer. Awesome, right? Well, 100 hours later and having finished the project, earning the entire price of the computer, crap got sour. It all went to heck when my dad called me 2 days later and said that he wouldn't be getting me the computer because I hadn't done the job right. He'd seen it at every point in the process and told me I'd done a good job the day I finished. He also made it clear he wasn't going to help with college. My mom's a teacher, my dad's a doctor. A month after this happened, I found out through an oblivious family friend that my father had bought a second house, huge house, and a BMW. My son, mother and I managed to take care of the school costs, graduating in May. TLDR. My wealthy doctor dad cheated me out of $1,000 of work, didn't help with college costs, and instead bought a huge house and fast car. He is currently paying for stepsister's schooling. When my father was dying 4 weeks in the hospital, my half-sister, who is a terrible ex-everything addict who was living in a halfway house for using selling H at the time, OBTW, she hadn't seen him in a couple years, showed up the day he was dying and stole the only things of value in his personal effects. The iPod I had personally bought and filled with his favorite songs and a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses he always wanted. I got him for Father's Day. She stole them while I was in the room with him. If I ever have a reason to believe I won't live longer than a year, I'm gonna hurt her in some way, then die. It will make my life complete. I have 3 older sisters. When I was little, maybe 6 or 7, my aunt and uncle gave my 2 older sisters very nice jewelry boxes for Christmas. My other sister and I got something else since we were younger and wouldn't appreciate the jewelry boxes. Well, a few weeks later my uncle and aunt split up. My uncle is my mom's brother and the aunt was just crazy, only related to us through their marriage. She ended up sending a letter to my mom demanding the jewelry boxes be sent back since she bought them with her own money, not my uncle's. My mom never told us about this letter until we were older and refused to send back the gifts. The woman was CRZY. The sad part is they had just finished building a huge mansion with a brand new horse farm since they both loved to ride horses. My uncle lived in the empty house for another year by himself and ended up selling it. We got to see it once. It was awesome. The biggest house I've ever been in. I caught my ex-wife cheating on me 2 days before Christmas and I left her at my house and took my 3 kids with me. Christmas Day came and I had very little to give them, but we had a nice morning opening the one gift apiece I had to give them. My ex picked them up at noon and they opened all the gifts I had gotten them that I had left at my house. When they came back that night, all they could talk about was all the stuff their mother got them for Christmas. Feel Spudman JPG. One day your kids will put it together. I didn't witness it, but my ex's alcoholic dad out of the blue one day, when my ex and her mom were out of town, locked the younger daughter in the closet, told her he didn't love any of them anymore, left to go get a moving truck, and packed everything in the house up and left. My ex and her mom returned home hours later to find an empty house and the other daughter still locked in the closet sobbing. The dad moved down to Florida to work under the table for his rich parents. Because he had no reported income but could afford a good lawyer, He wasn't required to make child support payments. He also had all the bills and the 2 mortgages on the house all put in the mother's name only, leaving her in bankruptcy as a single mother with no job experience. Luckily, they made it through with the support of family and friends, but apparently it was very chaotic for several years. My grandmother on my dad's side did something very similar. She got me and my little brother's Christmas gifts, to include the holy grail of all gifts for a 4-year-old me, a freaking Bigfoot freaking Power Wheels. Shortly after getting it put together and riding it for the first time, my mother and grandmother got into an argument about something beyond my comprehension. Needless to say, all the gifts she brought, including my freaking Bigfoot freaking Power Wheels, were not around after the new year. God, these freaking morons spreading their crap all over kids like this. If you wanna mix it up with your fellow adults and treat them like crap, fine. At least they can usually process it and understand. Most of them, I should say, but dang, leave the kids the frick out of it. My brother moved in with his ex-wife and 2 kids. He was there a month or 2 and right about the time the kids started to think of him as dad again, he went back to his current wife as she had a job for him in another state. I have a lot of stories of my butthole brother, but this is one of the tops in magnitude of a sholishness. My soon-to-be fill out of the blue contacted a real estate agent to help us look for houses after badmouthing the apartments we currently live in, declaring them unfit for his grandchildren to grow up in. He had told the agent what the price range we were looking in, and that he had about $20,000 to put towards a smaller house. I spent weeks online and in person, narrowing down my search, all the while excited out of my mind at the prospect of owning a home, and all the jazz that goes with. When we finally got it down to 2, we contacted said Phil. He came to the properties and gave us his opinion, which was stupid rich guy nonsense about mature trees being something we needed because they add to the value, not once looking at pipes or foundations, which I found strange. My fiancé and I went home to ponder the final decision, only to be informed by the real estate agent that the Phil, when asked to start signing papers, now has no money for this project, and claims he never offered to help to begin with. TLDR. Father-in-law offered to buy a house, backs out after we pick one. Dong bag a Mormon. My dad did the same thing with college. When I was a little girl, my father was absolutely I guess the best term I can come up for it is emotional sadist. More than anything else in the world, he loved to make me cry. This resulted in years of extreme mental and emotional torture and neglect on his part, including starvation, which he delighted in. There were many incidents of incredible emotional sadism on his part, but the one that really sticks out in my mind was the day that he convinced me that my mother was dead. I was in kindergarten. My mother had gone to get an MRI done. I don't remember why she needed one, but it was for something fairly innocuous. Her appointment was in the morning, so my father took me to school instead of her. She saw us off in the morning, kissed me goodbye, and away we went. The entire ride to school, about 40 minutes as he made sure to take his time that day, he convinced me that the MRI was going to kill my mother. He made it very clear that she was going to go have this procedure done, and then would die. I would never see her again, and that morning had been the last I would ever see of her, dead or alive. He then dropped me off at the far end of the school sidewalk and sped away without a word. Before I even made it to my classroom, I was unconsolable and crying hysterically. I was so distraught, I couldn't even tell the teachers what was wrong. This was a state that lasted until my mother arrived at the end of the school day to pick me. When she confronted my father about what he had done, he just laughed, and laughed, and laughed. The evilest thing in this entire thread, frick him. When I was just starting college, a group of new acquaintances and I went out clubbing. There were 7 of us, none of whom knew each other prior to that week, and only 3 of which, myself included, were of age. We all got in and were having a great time. One of the girls who was also of age suggested we go and get pizza down the street, so we all went out, got our hands stamped so we could get back in, and got pizza. When we came back, she said to the bouncer, "Better check these folks. 4 of them are underage," and she howled with laughter as they got photographed and kicked out. I left too, of course. It was genuinely my first time encountering that stereotypical mean girl. I didn't grow up with any equivalents in high school. What did the 5 fingers say to the face? Where do I even start? Well, my dad basically just hates the fact that I'm alive. He thinks I killed my twin while we were still inside the womb. Rest assured, my twin died of natural reasons. I didn't strangle him with the umbilical cord. I'm a demon child cause he thinks I look like some kind of omen kid. I'm the dumbest kid ever existed, hence he forced the idea of homeschooling me to my mother just so he won't get embarrassed. Those are what he says my mistakes. I am basically just wrong since the day I was born. So his drunk butt mind thinks there needs to be a punishment for being such an evil child. Mind you, I was a little skinny boy and never said a word back to him ever. So here's my punishments. Belt buckle to my back. Physical education at maybe 7 years old or 6. By watching him frick the cleaning lady. Countless drunken rage. Countless remote to the head whenever his fave football, or you lot call them soccer, lose. etc. So no, that's not his diecast movie yet. He was diagnosed with severe liver and kidney failure when I was 20ish, and on his deathbed, my aunts and uncle thought it would be a good idea for me to have a father and son moment. He was really on his last breath, he was dying. Breath even smells like death. Anyhow, I grew up a lot by then. I was basically okay with the fact that he's insane and thought that if I said it's okay old man, have a blast in your next life. No karmas here. That'll make it easier on him. Nope. His last words was son, I regret nothing. Your father was a sociopath. You don't have to be. If you have children, just do the opposite of what he did to you. Don't get upset when they don't appreciate it though. That is the gift you are giving them. My grandparents on my dad's side were very religious. They opened up churches all across the country and finally settled here where my grandpa pastored until his death. While they lived here, they also hosted elderly mentally challenged people in their home. They had strict rules and had to meet with a medical team often. My grandpa was never good at finances. My grandma dealt with the money and tried to prevent him from spending it all. My grandma died. 2 years ago already. A few months later, I'm at my grandpa's wedding. At the time, I was frustrated and betrayed, but the let the old man have his fun argument finally convinced me. This new lady seemed okay. She was going to the same church and seemed respectful of my grandma's legacy. For the past 2 years, my dad moved out and started living with the girl he cheated on my mom with. Complicated story. He moved in with my grandpa. My grandpa made my dad in charge of all the finances in his will, including the inheritance. The inheritance wouldn't have been much as he spent all my grandma's money after she passed and bought land he could not afford. One thing that was guaranteed to get passed down to me was my grandma's Bible. She had personal notes and kept track of family dates and birthdays and there. My grandpa and his new wife moved just out of town. He cut off contact with us. At Christmas, we invited him over. We didn't hear back from him. Then, when my mom went out the front door to grab something from the car, she saw presents in the doorway. Yeah, on Christmas he stopped at our house and didn't even bother to knock. In the 9 months they were married, without informing my dad or even alluding to it, my grandpa changed his will and left everything to his new wife. She didn't bring this up until the actual meeting, where my dad was taking charge. So the B is taking everything meant for my grandpa's sons, without remorse. Apparently she even laughed about it during the meeting. My dad and uncle are saying frick it and not going to court as my grandpa had so much debt and no one really cares about the inheritance anyway. My mom asked her about the Bible. She said, oh, well I'll look for it, but you know, we moved so yeah. She's even taking the land that was donated to my grandparents to build a church on. Her butthole son, who seems like a freaking loser, is being told that he should take over the church and my grandfather's legacy. The funeral is an hour. Can't wait for the family dynamics. Wish me luck. My very religious parents were always extremely poor, and kept getting poorer when I was growing up, yet they managed, with the help of some relatives, to save about $22,000 for me for college over 17 years. Anyway, I went to college for free on scholarship and didn't use it. During college I had come out as transgender and that wasn't very popular with my family, and I had to start living out of my car, my dorm, or other people's houses because I wasn't welcome to go home. Essentially I was marginally homeless, in the sense that they claimed me on their taxes but didn't in any way feed or house me. Anyway, they still had my money. During my senior year they finally said they'd welcome me home with open arms for Christmas. They had been super nice to me on the phone for a month or two before, and I was excited about not spending Christmas eating canned goods in my car. Upon arrival at home, I'm basically locked down in the laundry room with no access to the outside world, forced to wear male clothing, sleep on a mattress on the floor, and told humans sleep in beds. Animals sleep in here. I had to pay for my own groceries while I stayed in there for 3 weeks. Even though I desperately needed durable shoes and some money for gas and food and toiletries, my parents told my relatives not to give me money because I would misuse it and instead to chip in to buy a useless acoustic guitar. Now I say useless because 1. I'm a classical guitar player and they knew this and counted upon the insult, and 2. I was living out of my car eking by. Finally they had to let me out or one of my friends was going to report me kidnapped. Then they sent me a letter saying they were taking all of my money until I found Jesus, and even then, probably not. To top it off, they ended the letter by asking when my graduation was and demanding invites for themselves and all my relatives and demanding that I'd transition to walk across the stage so I wouldn't offend them. Heck, I'm freaking gorgeous and I freaking strutted across that stage. Then with some help from the bank, I got my money. Then I got in my friend's car, went to the airport, bought a plane ticket to Illinois, and now I'm making more money than my parents combined. Frick those people. Dude, seriously, you go. When I was 16 years old, the summer before grad year, I returned from a family vacation to find my entire house trashed. Someone had broken into the house and evidently had a party. There were empty beer bottles on the ground and the place was generally trashed. No major damage, but it was a mess. People had been sleeping, likely fricking, in my bed. It was gross. To make matters worse, the day before we left for vacation we had rolled up a bunch of loose change and put the rolls in a bag. There was about $1,100 of change. On the mirror in the bathroom the words "Thanks Gargamel" were written in red lipstick, so we knew the person was someone that knew me. We later deduced that they had entered using a sort of secret entrance that only I and my few best friends knew about. I talked to all of my friends about it. I have some idea who it might be, but I don't want to start making accusations without knowing for sure. Some of my friends are into drugs and I thought that this was probably a factor. Months pass and no one fesses up. I tell them that I am willing to forgive them, not be their friend anymore, but not press charges and just let them live their life. If they come forward, complete silence. My parents get the cops involved. One day I get a call from my friend. Gargamel, what the frick man? You made John name changed. Go to the cop shop for an interrogation? You know he's cool. They scared him so much he agreed to pay back the money even though he didn't do it. I know John. He is flat broke and he doesn't really care about authority figures. There is absolutely no way he would agree to pay back the money if he didn't steal it in the first place. At that moment I knew exactly who had done it. He would later confess, but from that phone call forwards I knew. The thing about John is we had been best friends since kindergarten. He had a very rough childhood. His parents were nuts, especially his mom, one of the most frightening people I've ever met. His dad always had trouble finding good work, and he had some serious behavior issues. As we got into high school he got into drugs. I did too, but not in the same way, and he was a pretty big coke fiend by 16. I was always there for him. He was a real dong to me sometimes, but I always supported him. I'd take him to hockey games, let him sleep over when crap was bad at his house, get him high when he was too broke to pick up. I'm not really angry about it anymore, just sad that our friendship had to end like that. Sometimes I wonder what he's doing these days. I hope he is well. To make matters worse, the day before we left for vacation we had rolled up a bunch of loose change and put the rolls in a bag. There was about $1,100 of change. $1,100 in change. Okay, my father cheats on my mother for several years. Sick bastard decides to tell my mother that the woman he's seeing, who he works with, has a crush on him and is throwing herself at him, but he's bravely resisting. What kind of total butthole alludes to his own affair? Misses me 7th birthday party because he's fricking his affair woman. Secretly remortgages our house into the ground so he can leave and buy a new house with his new woman. A few years before this my great grandmother had died and my grandmother gives my mother several £1,000s of the inheritance. She tells my mum to keep it a secret because she knew my dad would take it. Of course the sneaky bastard finds out, and then he became abusive until my mother in tears authorized him to drain the account. Buys a new car for himself with it. So after the divorce, this sucker is earning about 3 times the salary of my mother, who can only barely afford to feed her kids and give them a reasonably normal life on her tiny salary with now huge mortgage payments. Not only that, she's driving a freaking rust bucket around, whilst he's driving a new car he bought with her money. After the divorce and about 2 weeks of paying child support, the C decides he's paying too much. Convinces his company to pay him mainly in bonds rather than real money so his earnings fall. Then he pays more than my mother can ever afford on some expensive lawyer so that we have no hope of making him ever pay more than pittance through the courts. So the T is now paying next to nothing for his own kids, after having financially sabotaged them. So many disappointing years pass and somehow eventually I make it to uni. Now being from a poor family and financing yourself is freaking hard, but I manage it. But nobody in London will rent a flat to me. The only chance in heck you can get a rental as a student is with a guarantor. Somebody who'll sign and say they'll promise to cover it if you can't pay rent. And everybody in my family is too poor to lay out the guarantee. Luckily my father promises he'll cover it. A pittance compared to his salary. We sort out the flat 2 months before I'm supposed to move in. Then the sucker decides to tell me the day before that he won't be my guarantor after all. It's too risky in case I can't pay my rent and he has to pay some. That's why I don't like him anymore. Oh, he also gave my mother a black eye just before I was born by punching her in the face. And he told me I didn't stop messing around on women until I was 27. He dated my mother from 23 until 27 when they got married. Within weeks of marrying my mother, my father told her, now you do the housework and cooking. That's what wives do. Does getting regularly beat by his father whilst growing up somehow absolve him of all this? So, the theme is gifts. 5 years old, I begin to open my first gift. I like the paper and I know that my grandmother is extremely frugal. I'm slowly peeling the tape. Stepdad gets angry. I'm not demonstrating enough enthusiasm. He and grandmother get into an argument about how kids should open gifts. He then takes my gift and starts ripping the paper off while yelling at grandmother. They each grab another of my gifts and proceed to show each other how to open gifts. I bolt to my room. They continue to argue. Can't remember B-day or anniversary. I feel my now ex-wife has spent a ton of time with kids and is not really taking time for herself. I pick out 2 books I think she'll like, some bubble bath and such. When I give her the gift, I tell her that she's done so much she needs to take time for herself, so the real gift isn't the books, but is time. That is, whenever she wants she should just take a break and I'll cover whatever she needs. Kid duty, making a meal, whatever. Starts screaming at me that she can't believe I just bought her books and that that's not enough of a gift. Christmas. Spend hours figuring out gift with person's son. We pick out a bracelet. Spend a fair amount of time debating whether we should get silver or gold, as perhaps she'll think gold is too much, etc. Buy the silver, which was not cheap in and of itself. BTW. But certainly isn't the point. Give gift. Screamed for a good while about how I didn't put enough thought into the gift, etc. TLDR. I don't particularly care for gift giving occasions. I'm terribly sorry. I know that was probably traumatizing, but I can't stop laughing at that image. Goddamn it, Ethel, I will show you how to unwrap a present. This is serious business. I met an unemployed guy who was poor and barely able to feed his family or pay the bills. So I hire him to regularly do our lawn and pay him a higher than average fee to have the lawn mowed. While we go out of town the week he usually mows, and I tell him to just mow it like usual and prepaid him. Well, I get back and the lawn hasn't been mowed. I just figured something came up. Not a big deal. So I try to call him and he doesn't answer. Called a few more times over the next couple days and got concerned for him, thinking something may have happened, hoping there is something I can do to help him. Well, I go out to my shed, open it up, and everything is gone. Stolen. I suspect him but know that there was no evidence he did it besides his suspicious behavior of avoiding me. Call the cops. File a report. They pretty much say that I won't ever see any of the stuff again, and that is that. Well, I am walking around Walmart a few months later. I see him. His eyes widen and he literally turns and quickly walks the other way. It was at that moment I knew. TLDR. Hired a poor guy to mow my lawn. He stole everything from me. I told my best friend that his friend violated me. He was shocked, but concluded that he didn't mean it, and effectively told everyone in the community that I lied about being violated so that I wouldn't interfere with their lives. It sucks because my in-laws live in the same community, and my mill used to make jokes like be careful not to drink too much, you wouldn't want something you regret to happen, etc. Bro, I did not realize how fricked up that was until I wrote it down. Doubt anyone will see this, but here it goes. I have a mother that would do anything for her kids. She has battled and survived cancer and numerous other illnesses. My sister called her one day saying she has been diagnosed with cancer and needed $5,000 for the surgery that she's going to need. She tells my mom everything from who the doctor is to what they are going to do. My mom in tears rushes to take out a loan and immediately heads to pay for it, where, as you might have guessed, finds out my sister lied about the whole thing. When my mom calls her to ask her what's going on, my sister yells at her for going to the doctor's office first and not just giving her the money and hangs up on her. Oh, and she also stole my Christmas money that year. Not cool. Yikes, I hope your sister is only 17. There was this kid I knew in high school who was on the periphery of my group of friends. Nobody really liked him all that much, but we ourselves were sort of an amalgam of the kids that didn't fit in elsewhere, so we sort of felt obligated to include him if he made the effort, which he usually didn't. I was in the cafeteria one day and didn't have a place to sit, but I saw him, so I figured, well, why not, and ate my lunch with him. He told me he just got a Super Nintendo, and as he knew I had one, he wanted to trade games. At first I welcomed the idea, since I didn't have a lot of games and didn't really have any trading partners, but then he explained that he only had the game which came with the system, which I obviously had, so it'd be pointless for him to exchange anything with me. I was a bit suspicious, but then he started promising the stars, moon, sun and sky once he started getting his own games, so I figured, what the heck, if he's serious, it's worth the risk. The next day I gave him my copy of Pillar Twins. A week later, I asked him if he could return my game. It was my game, but my brother and sister noticed it was missing and had suddenly decided it was the best game in the history of video games and wanted it back. He seriously pulled the whole what video game routine, like some bad mafia parody. He clearly had every intention of pretending our exchange had never happened, and I decided then and there that if we were going to be all mafias about it, and I had just seen A Bronx Tale and remembered this advice. You don't even like him. There's your answer right there. Look at it this way. It cost you $20 to get rid of him, right? He's never gonna bother you again. He's never gonna ask you for money again. He's out of your life for $20. You got off cheap. Forget about it. So I never told anyone, never talked to him again, and he stayed out of my group of friends for the rest of high school. He got a free game, but he had only himself to play with. When I was in labor, literally in the labor and delivery room at the hospital, I was in excruciating pain. My now ex-husband was adamant that I do not get an epidural. His ignorance about its effects were the reason. After many hours, I could not take it anymore. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I will never forget it. Fine, get an epidural, but when we get home I can play WoW and you cannot nag me about it." That is on the list of the stupidest freaking things you say to the woman about to give birth to your baby. When she was born, he was terribly and visibly disappointed that it was not a boy. I knew a very lovely girl once, who I met at a local karaoke. She was seeing the regular DJ at this particular bar and later confessed to me that she had contracted herpes from contact with him. Apparently it was a mouth-to-tea transmission stemming from his cold sores, but nonetheless, it was a bit upsetting to hear. During their time together, he also had a main girlfriend who loved him and lived with him, but was completely platonic. He ended up seeing this friend of mine behind her back, but it was largely perceived as an unspoken and accepted practice after some time, as his main girlfriend became aware of it through casual suspicion. Now that particular arrangement seems perfectly reasonable to me so long as all parties are in the know and consenting, but the fact that he was banging just about every other girl who went to that bar on his karaoke nights was troubling. What's worse is, He wasn't bagging his dong in the process and giving all of these other unsuspecting women permanent crotch rot, not to mention whatever else. In my mind, knowingly spreading a life-changing illness is reason enough to break the balls bro code, so I felt compelled to inform this girl of what was going on. Naturally, he was furious to find out and ended up barring me from his shows. What's worse is, she not only chose to stay with him despite his actions, but casually cut me out of her life in the process, largely due to his hatred for me. To summarize, it was a double dong move and I was a victim of both. Guy bans me from his shows, and girl bans me from her life because of it. TLDR. Guy puts friend at risk by fricking countless women unprotected. I tell her, she ends up ditching me instead of him. I introduced my best friend, Kevin, to a girl that I knew through work so that they could go on a date. All three of us worked at the same place. They started dating and then I quit that job. Shortly after I quit that job, I stopped hearing from Kevin. One of my other friends, Brandon, informed me that his now girlfriend gave him an ultimatum. He could either keep dating her and stop talking to me, or she would dump him. I confronted him on this and he denied that it had happened. However, we have not said more than 2 words to each other since this has happened. They are now engaged and are having a baby together. The best part about this is that everyone that knew her, including Brandon and myself, found out that she had been continuously cheating on him with some girl for their entire relationship. She had informed him of the cheating at the beginning of the relationship and had told him that it was over. However, that was a lie. So, now they'll end up getting married and I'm sure he'll end up being fricked over due to all of it. TLDR. Best friend of 12 years decides to not talk to me anymore because his cheating girlfriend told him not to. We are both 23. You'll hear from him again when they get divorced. He will apologize, etc. He will occasionally mention that it would be good to hang out like he used to. Poor sucker will be unhappy for years due to his own stupidity. It was Christmas time, and my boyfriend got some stuff from his father, and his father's girlfriend for Christmas. His sister got much more, due to her being really spoiled. The next day, his father took all of his gifts back to the store to buy his sister some more stuff. Dong move man. Dong move. Oh, so my dad was dating this woman for a while. Eventually she and her son moved in with my father and I. For whatever reason she just kind of took off, leaving her teenage kid with us. So he lives with us for a while. He has a room, food, and my dad gives him cash for whatever every now and then. Well, shortly after he moved out he ended up breaking into our house with a bunch of friends with shotguns and robbing us of thousands of dollars of crap. I had a shotgun pointed at my head while a guy shouted at me to keep my freaking face on the pool table because of that kid. I'd say that's probably the biggest dong move I can think of. I was laid off by my company 3-4 years ago. It was an awesome job. IT in a giant industrial complex. No MGMT around to stifle fun. As long as we got our day's work done we could do whatever the heck we wanted. So we got paid to have Nerf gun wars and watch movies and whatever. The economy goes to crap and the contract we were on gets terminated. Boom, 70 people laid off. I get hired back 6 months later by the lady that laid me off for less money and double the work. But I didn't care cause I was so happy to have a job again. 6 months later I find out that I make less than everyone in the building and it's a huge freaking joke and everyone knows it. I literally make less than the lady at the reception desk. So I ask this lady who laid me off and rehired me for less money, for more money, and she laughed at me and told me that she is going to have to lay me off again. Then said she was joking and gave me even more work with no extra pay on a third contract. So I've taken this crap now for 3 years building up San XP and now I am starting to get interest in my resume. I can't wait for the exit interview with her. I've been writing it now for 3 years and it is freaking branded on my brain with hate. I'm positive things will work out for you. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.